Today we have an interesting information from Forbes on 2022 billionaires. We are going to analyze this data and create a dashboard using pivot and pivot charts. Before we proceed with this data, I'm going to select the data range and convert it to a power table. So let's press Ctrl T on the Windows. I have my headers. I'm going to change the style and I'm going to uncheck this banded rows, and let's look at each column. A rank is a numerical field and we do not have blank. Name, again we do not have any blank. Age, it's a numerical field and we see there are some blank, so I'm gonna uncheck all and select only blanks so that we could rename it to something else or update the blanks with something else. Let's do that. Let's call this as not disclosed. Okay, let's remove the filter, final width, and we notice that the zeros are truncated. I'm going to add additional zeros. Let's create a column towards the end and call it as dollar worth, and let's put some simple formulas. Okay, change the format to an accounting format. Remove the zeros after the decimal, and this looks better when compared to the other column. Column E is the year. We just have the current year, and month, it's the fourth month. We are not going to have any previous month information. Category, we could see these are the industries that the billionaires belong to. Probably we could rename it to industry. And there is a source. We could see we do not have any blank here. And country, where do they belong to? We could see there are some blanks. Let's make some edits in case we are going to look into this deeper. And states, definitely we will have blanks because countries had blanks. Here we have it. And city will also have blanks. There's another column which says country of citizenship. So let's look at it. Surprisingly, we do not have blanks. So for our analysis, we are going to use country of citizenship. And column M is organization. You could see some blank. And there's another interesting column which says self-made. Kind of to say if a billionaire is a self-made or is it like not. So we have a boolean value, true or false, and we have gender. We have blanks in the gender. I'm going to select it and probably say not disclosed. Remove the filter. Date of birth, title. Yeah, this is again an interesting one, philanthropy score, and it's being rated between 1 and 5, and there are a few blanks as well, and 1 being the highest and 5 being the lowest. Let's cancel this. And residence, number of siblings. We have a small bio about the billionaire and a short description about the billionaire as well. Let's color this column because we kind of created it. Let's make it blue, and let's go to table design. I'm going to change this table name to 2022 BN, billionaire. Okay, so it doesn't okay, it should start with a alphabet. So let's say BN 2022. Oh, okay. Does it include space? Okay, so let's call it as just BN. This should be good. Now let's move on to create a dashboard. So I'm just moving the sheet. I'm going to call it as dashboard, and let's start creating the dashboard. And as and when we are going to look at what data we are going to have it on the dashboard, we are going to create the pivots. So to have the pivots, let's insert a sheet and call it as pivots. Okay, on the dashboard, let's assume we are going to utilize this entire area or the text. Let's not go with the traditional way. Let's make it a little different. So I'm going to call it as Forbes 2022 Billionaires. Okay, I'm going to select, okay, FORBS. Okay, so I'm going to select this, go to home, click on this formatting, make it small caps, and click OK. And now let's select this and make some tweaks. Okay, so this looks better, and probably we could reduce the size. Let's make it 40. Okay, and let's introduce a shape, a line, and this line, let's say, let's have it from here to until column U. So press the all right, so there we go. Now let's give it a color. Okay, let's make it a little gray. Okay, this looks better. Okay, so now we are there. We have created the header, and we have just separated it, and now we're going to talk about the data. What is that? We are going to bring it over here. So now let's talk about the billionaires. We need to know how many billionaires do we have. uh, I mean, before we even get into slicing and dicing the data, we're going to talk about how many billionaires we are having on the data. So let's say we need a text box, or let's say a shape. um, let's pick this rectangle. Okay, this is the same one. Okay, okay, so this looks okay. So we're gonna have a box. Let's kind of change the way that it is appearing right now. Okay, so okay, and I'm gonna copy this and paste it again, and I'm gonna have it just below this. Probably okay. So let's remove the color, no fill, and probably shape outline, no outline. let's have an outline, because let's give a lighter shade of outline, and okay, this looks better. Let's add some text. So edit text, we're gonna say total billionaires. Let's select this, center align, make it bold, and just change it to small caps. Okay, I guess this should be good. Now we know we're gonna bring in total billionaires here. Let's go to the pivot. We're gonna insert a pivot to just bring in the total billionaires we have. So I'm gonna say insert pivot, and I know my table name is BN, and I'm just gonna click and drag the total values. So yep, so I'm gonna insert I would say, like, let's call this count of person as total BN, billionaires, and let's go to the pivot table analyze and change the pivot name and call it as total underscore BN. Okay, so now we know the total billionaires. Let's also bring in the worth, as in the dollar worth, total dollar worth, and I'm gonna change this format. Let's go to custom, okay, dollar hash 3 times comma, and let's say within quotations BN. Okay, so this is the total value, as in the billion value. Okay, let's make this okay. So now this looks better. So now we have the total billionaires and their worth. What we are going to do here is we are going to put this total billionaires as well as the total worth in one cell, so that we could bring it up over here in this shape that we came up with. So what we are going to do is we are going to say equals get pivot table total billionaires, and ampersand within quotations backslash, and again an ampersand, and then the total worth. So when we click the enter button, we are going to get a format which is not so pleasing. We're going to change the format, and to change the format we are going to select only this get pivot data and insert a formula and say text, then the get pivot table comma within quotations dollar hash comma hash 3 times comma, and then close a bracket, and then let's say an ampersand and within quotations BN. So now this looks better, and we know it's in column B5 in pivots. So we're going to go here and select the shape that we want, click on the formula bar, click the formula bar and say equals, go to the pivot and select B5. Let's freeze this so that we don't have to check that every now and then. Click enter and we have it here. So what we are going to do is we're going to adjust it and probably bold. Okay, now let's make it a little bigger. Yes. Okay, now this makes sense. We know total billionaires and their net worth, and I'm going to make some changes to the total number as well. So I'm going to use the same text formula and comma within quotations hash comma hash. All right, so it's changed here automatically. So whatever we have, we are able to see it here. So we now know like total billionaires and their net worth. Now the next question is how many of them are self-made. So the next question is like how many of them are self-made. So what we are going to do is we are going to just copy this. Let's group it. Okay, let's copy that and paste it over here, and probably let's say total self-made billionaires, and we're going to change this. Let's go to the pivot tab, introduce a pivot. I'm going to copy the same pivot that we have. I'm going to paste it in column E, and I'm going to change the name here, call self-made. All right, so there's no change in the total and the net worth. We're just going to introduce a filter here. Let's look for self-made column, put it in filters, and let's say true. And if you look at this formula is getting up the data from the previous pivot. We are going to change it to this pivot. So let's do this. Alright, so here we have. So I'm going to cut it and paste it a little lower so that we have enough room space. And let's go to dashboard again. Here let's make some edits. Before that, let's look at this data. It is in E7. Let's go to dashboard, click on this rectangle, and let's say E7, and we will have to make some changes. Let's do this. Select it, format, paste. Oh. Okay, let's undo that. Let's ungroup it, and let's ungroup this as well. Now this is easier. So we know there are like 2,668 billionaires, out of which 1,891 are self-made billionaires. And the next question we're going to ask is how many are philanthropic billionaires. Okay, so let's do that. Let's copy this visual again, paste it over here, and so I'm giving a short form because we do not have sufficient space. I'm just giving a short form. I'm going to the pivots. I'm going to copy what we had for self-made. I'm going to paste it over here, and remove self-made from the filters and add philanthropy score. And here what we are going to do is we're going to say select multiple and remove blank. So which means we are just removing the blank, which means for those who have not been rated, assuming they are not philanthropic or they are not been categorized or rated as philanthropic. And again on column H, row number 7, we see there is some text. We need to make some changes. Press F2, change the reference. Now we have this new number for philanthropic billionaires. It's in H7. I'm going to go to the dashboard page, select the rectangle, and instead of E7 it's going to be H7, and I'm going to copy and paste the same format. So now we know the total billionaires, total self-made billionaires, and total philanthropic billionaires. So the next question that we have, how many are male and how many are female? So again, let's go to pivots. I'm selecting the same. Before that, we did not change the pivot name. I'm going to change it over here. Let's say fill, and I'm going to copy this. I'm going to, let's say, paste it here. I'm going to call this as yam, and let's remove this philanthropic score and bring in gender and say male. And I'm going to copy this again, paste it on the bottom, and I'm going to say this is female and change the name to F. So the changes that we need to do is here we just have to bring up the reference to this cell, and for this as well, let's click and drag. Alright, so we have it. So for male it is B16 and B26 is for female. I'm going to the dashboard, copy this, paste it over here, again paste it over here. Let's change this as okay, and here let's do the same, and let's go. Okay, so here we're gonna say B16. Okay, let's have a look. B16, yes, we are right, and this is gonna be B26. 26B. Let's copy the formats. Alright, so the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to group these so that it's easy for us to move in case we are going to change the alignment. So let's group individually, group, okay, so let's do that grouping. Grouping is done. and I'm gonna select everything, and let's say align, distribute um, horizontally. Yep, this is distributed, and I'm gonna group this again, so it's like multiple groups. Okay, so it's easy for us to kind of move. Great. Now we know the basic things. The I mean, the total billionaires, self-made billionaires, philanthropic billionaires, male and female count, and the net worth. So the next thing is we're going to look at who are the top 10 billionaires. Let's jump into the pivot page, and let's look at the first uh, pivot, and let's move towards the right, and probably let's paste it in K3, and let's remove total billionaires and let's have only total worth, and bring in person name. So we have all the billionaires here. However, we are interested only in top 10. Let's apply a filter here on the row labels. So let's say name, and let's use the value filter top 10 based on total dollar worth. So when we click on this, we have the top 10, and we don't need the total. Let's go to a design, and let's turn off the grand total rows and the columns, and subtotal, let's turn it off, and we are gonna sort it descending, alt ds, largest to the smallest, and we have it. So we know who is the uh, uh, I mean richest person. I'm gonna go to pivot table, analyze, pivot chart, and now I will have a column, a columnar chart, and let's say okay, and let's play around a little bit, remove on the formatting. Let's remove the total and say top 10 billionaires. Okay, and let's hide this. Let's get away with this. Before that, let's choose a design which looks good. Yep, this looks better, and let's make this bold and see if at all we have any other different styles. Okay, we don't have. Let's go to the design and see if we could change the colors, if it makes sense. Okay, no, no. No, let's have it for the first color palette, and let's bring it down. Select the pivot table, go to pivot table, analyze, change it to change the name to top 10, and then select this, Control X, cut, and we're gonna paste it here. Let's make it a little small. Let's not make it a little bigger. At the same time, the names should be readable. Okay, so now we have it. We have the top 10 billionaires. The next thing that we are going to look at is let's look at where are these billionaires coming from? Where do they come from? Which country do they come from? So let's go to pivot. I'm going to select the same, copy this, let's say I'm going to paste it over here and remove this filter and remove this person name and look for country of citizenship, and let's call it as country here. Sort it by descending. Here we are not gonna show okay, let's have this here, and let's look at how many countries do we have here. Surprisingly, we have 75 countries, and let's rename this to country. And let's also bring in total person. So let's say total BN. Okay, let's say total BN. Let's create a chart which can show us both the information. Let's go to home or insert recommended charts. No, let's look at, no, this is not helping us. Let's go here and let's look at tree map. Tree map is not supporting pivot. Let's go to a combo chart, and in combo chart what we could see is, okay, let's make the total net worth as a secondary axis and total billionaires on the primary axis. Let's click OK. We are going to make some changes here. Let's hide these and let's click on the total net worth and right click on it and say format data series. Go to this option, paint bucket option. Let's look at the marker options. Let's say built-in. I'm choosing an orange and let it be for the size 5. Fill, it's automatic. Let's make it with a little less color so that it looks different. Instead of a square, let's put a circle, and line, let's say we don't need a line. Okay, so okay, let's say solid line. Okay, so let's say automatic. Let's go to line and then say no line, so that we don't have lines but we just have the total worth plotted on the graph. Alright, so now we have that information. Let's look at the legend. So I'm going to move this legend to the bottom so we have enough space, and let's reduce, before that we could change the design. Let's look at some designs. Okay, so let's look at some designs. Okay, so probably the design one looks okay. Let's not make any changes, and let's look at the secondary axis. Let's reduce the size of the secondary axis to 1 and the primary axis also to 1, and change the color to white, and again the color to white here. So now we could see that the data or the axis is not visible, and let's make it a little bigger. Now we are able to bring in all the uh, countries here. However, what we could see is we are not able to see or the circles are overlapping the bars. So let's look at a way where we could make some changes. Double click on the secondary axis. Let's go to the axis options and say auto, let's say logarithmic scale. Yeah, now this gives a better idea. Or let's do the other way around. um, let's go to the design, chart type. Let's make the total billionaire as secondary axis and the net worth as the primary axis. Now let's make this one, change the color. Okay, so now this is better. Let's get away with the grid lines. Okay, so let's add the data labels. Okay, the data labels doesn't look good, so let's not do that. Alright, so let's add a title and call it as Billionaires by location. I'm gonna change that into small caps, bold. So let's copy this or cut this, go to the dashboard and paste it over here. This is going beyond the limit that we had, so let's kind of reduce it a little bit. Okay, so now we have billionaires by location, and what we can do is, okay, remove this and see if we could format the same way. No, this doesn't look good, so let's do this. One and this. No, this doesn't look good, so we are going back to our original design. Okay, so now we know the billionaires by location. Now the next question is, which industry do they come from? Or yes, so let's go to pivot again. Let's copy this country, move to the top, for the right, let's paste it in O, and instead of country of citizenship I'm gonna bring in industry, and I'm gonna show only the billionaires, like total billionaires that we have. I'm gonna sort it by descending and go to pivot table, analyze, pivot chart, bar chart, and yes, I'm gonna choose a design. This looks better. Hide all, or I can even go to this, delete, delete, and let's look at the data labels options. Outside end, and let's make it black so that they are visible. Okay, total. Okay, let's call it as by industry. Okay, so let's go to the pivot, change this to industry, and go to pivot table analyze, change this to industry, cut. Let's go to dashboard and paste it over here, and let's make some changes. And let's make it black. Okay, so we could see that not all the industries are appearing, so let's make it a little bigger. Yes, now we are able to see all the industries. Wonderful. So let's look at the other things that we need to check. We need to know how many are self-made, and we already have it here as a total number, but let's look at how many are self-made and how many are not. A simple comparison. So I'm going to copy this, paste it over here, and let's call it as self-made, and let's also call this as self-made underscore 1. Let's go to the fields, remove industry, look for self-made, drag it to the rows, and we have it. So we're going to create a graph for this. Yes, so this should be good, and let's make a few changes. Okay, so let's call this as self-made, and let's delete this, cut this, let's go to the dashboard, paste it here, and let's replicate the formats, and let's change the design, and also reduce the size of the chart. Okay. Now we have a chart that talks about how many are self-made and how many are not. The next thing that we are going to bring in is the gender diversity. Let's say how many are male, how many are female, and how many of them have not disclosed. So let's copy the previous pivot, call it as gender, rename the name as gender. Okay, let's go to the rows, remove it, and look for gender. Yes, we have it. And we're going to create a chart. Create a chart and let's do some changes, formatting changes. Let's call this as okay. Delete this. Okay. Design. Okay, this should be good. Let's change the color to black so that it's visible. Control X. Let's go to the dashboard. Paste it over here. Make sure the height and width are adjusted. So now we know how many are self-made and what is the gender and all that. And another interesting thing what we could bring in is the age. Where do they fall? As in like which age? So I'm going to copy this industry and paste it over here. Let's call this as age and let's remove this, bring in age and let's go to pivot table analyze, pivot chart and histogram. Okay, so in this histogram we could see that it doesn't support the pivot table, so we will not be able to create it, but let's look at an alternative. Let's change this name first to age and let's create a formula, or let's write a formula, an offset formula. This will be the reference. Let's freeze this and say 0, again a 0, and height, we are going to say the total height of column R. I don't think we have anything else on the bottom, so let's say count A of column R. Let's freeze this, close it, and we need two columns, just column R and S. I'm going to close this and bingo, I have the same data, whatever it was in a pivot, now this is into a normal data range. So now I can go to insert and say recommended charts. I have a scatter plot chart. I can look at the data and it shows me like where do the majority of the billionaires fall under in terms of the age criteria. So let's look at a Pareto chart distribution. This is interesting, and let's look at this. Okay, let's look at this. Somewhere I'm just trying to see how is the data sorted. Okay, so we have the data here. Let's say age and choose this. Let's make it black. Okay, let's not do that. Let's Control X, go to the dashboard and paste it here. Just align it a little bit. Okay, let's look at this. Oh, uh, instead of a Pareto chart, let's change the chart type and use a histogram. Just look at this. Okay, this is better. Great. So now what we are going to do is we are going to select all the graphs that we just created and we are going to group these graphs. Well, why are we going to do that, or why are we doing this? Okay, let's group this as well. Group. So now the entire data is being grouped. Now the reason that we are grouping everything here is we are going to bring in some slices to play around with the data. Let's do that. Let's click and drag this data probably to row number 16. Yes, let's do this. Let's go to pivot. Let us select either one of the uh, pivot tables that we have. Go to pivot table analyze, say insert slicer. We are going to look at uh, industry as a slicer, country of citizenship, self-made, gender, philanthropy score, and what else? Okay, so let's look at source, city, organization, birth, title. Okay, let's go with this. Copy all the slices that we just created or cut. Let's go to the dashboard, paste it. Okay, let's play with the slices. Okay, looks like we need to bring this furthermore down. Let's do this. Okay, so now we have industry, where do they come from, and let's call this as country. Okay, and I'm going to increase to 3 so that let's see if we're able to cover. Okay, this should be good. And let's give 2. Okay, so now this is self-made and 2, 3. No, let's make it a single column, and philanthropy score, let this be 2. Okay, let's rearrange this. Philanthropy score, then the gender, and Okay, let's bring this furthermore down. Alright, so we're there. I'm just going to make some changes to the way that it is looking. Okay, great. So now what we have here is we have few slices and we have graphs, and we have some uh, information here. So let's look at an example, automotive as an example. If I look at automotive, I don't see anything getting changed here. uh, I could see this top 10 billion is changed. uh, let's kind of change this to black. Okay, now I know top 10 billion is in automotive industry. I can change it to healthcare, and this is the healthcare industry, but I don't see anything else getting changed. So what I am going to do is I'm going to uncheck this and make some changes. Let's go to slicer report connection. So this is an industry um, uh, slicer. I'm going to select everything else other than industry. Let's do this. Okay, so this is done. I just left industry. Click OK. On the country, I'm going to do the same thing. Select everything other than country. So what are we doing here is primarily trying to connect all the pivots to these slices. As and when we make changes to these slices, it should reflect. And the same thing to philanthropy score, everything else other than the score. I'll tell you why are we doing this, as in excluding a particular pivot table. So let's do this. Country. Okay, here let's kind of leave F, gender and M, because they are still part of the gender group. Click OK, and self-made. Okay, self-made, we're going to do the same thing. Okay, yes. So now we have these slices synced, and the next thing that we are going to do is we're going to test it. So let's look at energy as an example. Before that, let's kind of reduce the size. Okay, so let's look at logistics. So logistics, if you see, the locations kind of changed, and the top billion is also changed. So if you place your mouse pointer, you will have a tooltip. It will say it's 43 billion in France, and there are only 2 billionaires in France. Similarly, if you look at China, you have 8, and the total value is 20 billion. And if you scroll down, you have 25 self-made billionaires and 10 not. And if you're looking at logistic, and you will know how I mean, this will not change because you kind of used the industry. So it may not look good if you have just one bar here. So this doesn't change. And here it gives you a gender diversity, like how many are male, how many are female, how many have not disclosed their gender. And we will also be able to see the age group, and we could see there's one youngest uh, billionaire in logistics, And you will also see there are 35 billionaires in logistic, and their worth is 196 billion, and out of which 25 are self-made, which you could see it here as well, and 4 are philanthropic billionaires, and 31 are male and 3 are female. So the same thing you would see it in the graph here as well. And let's remove the filter here, and let's look at US. In US, let's look at food and beverages, and female. So now we know there are 17 billionaires or female billionaires in US in food and beverages industry, and among them these are the top 10. And since that we are playing around with country, this information does not change. This exhibits in the information only for female in food and beverage industry. Similarly, the gender gives you in United States in beverages, like how many male, female billionaires are there. And industry gives you information about how many female billionaires are there in US, and these are the industries. So this gives a fair slicing and dicing of the data. And finally what we are going to do is we are going to kind of hide all this unnecessary columns that we are not using it. I'm going to hide the grid lines, headers, formula bars, and let's hide this as well, and let's hide this as well. So this will be the dashboard which we could use to slice and dice the data and explore what the data is saying. So let's look at this. I can move this towards the end, and yep, let's also hide the rows which we are not using it. Hide. Okay. Oops. Okay, sorry. Probably there is something when we hide it, and we could place the cursor here and select and freeze so that it's easy to kind of scroll up and down with these slices on the top. This is a simple dashboard using pivot charts and pivot tables. This is not a fancy dashboard. This is a basic simple dashboard to analyze or even explore the data that we have.